Hi, I'm Greg Kilstrom, host of the Agile brand, and here's a question for you. What if the biggest barrier to scaling your retail media investment isn't technology, but a fundamental disagreement on what success even looks like? Agility requires not just adopting new tools, but also being willing to challenge the measurement frameworks we've grown accustomed to. Today, we're going to talk about the nuanced world of in store retail media measurement and why the old rules may no longer apply. Specifically, we're going to cover why the standard approach to measuring in store media, often borrowed from digital, is creating friction and stalling budget growth, how to create a unified measurement language that aligns brands, retailers, and agencies around a common definition of success, and practical steps to move in store media from experimental budgets to scalable, repeatable investments grounded in actual product movement. Welcome to Season 8 of the Agile Brand Podcast. This season, we're going all in on expert mode, MarTech, AI, and customer experience, talking with the people and platforms behind the brands you know and love. Again, I'm your host, Greg Kilstrom, and I help Fortune 1000 companies make sense of MarTech, AI, and marketing ops. Hit subscribe or follow to make sure you always get the latest episodes, and leave us a rating so others can find us as well. And make sure you check out our sponsor, TechSystems, an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world adoption. For more information, go to techsystems.com. Now let's dive in. To help me discuss this topic, I'd like to welcome Paul Brenner, SVP Global Retail Media and Partnerships at In-Store Marketplace, and Collin Colburn, Vice President, Commerce and Retail Media at IAB. Collin and Paul, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, looking forward to this. And before we dive in, though, why don't you each give a little background on yourselves and your roles at your orgs?
So Collin Colburn, at IAB, I lead our commerce and retail media initiatives, which includes a lot of work around measurement standards, in-store media, and just generally helping the industry build common language across brands, retailers, agencies, technology providers. And a lot of the work that we're doing today is less about inventing new standards or new metrics, because we've done a lot of that. It's more about helping the overall ecosystem understand where measurement or which measurement approaches are right for certain types of business questions. And I think what we're going to talk about today very much aligns with that recent work.
Right.
Yeah. I guess over the last 8 years, really focused on retail media and the in-store component. So now working with over 20 retail media networks around the world, focused on in-store, screens and audio. But I guess historically over 30 years, I've found the most success with any advertising-driven medium by looking at the greater good. And so I'm a big advocate of what IB does. I've done things in the past with FCC and, standards bodies across the world, always trying to take myself and our solution out of the equation and look at the greater good. And that's why I really put a lot of effort behind this, and everyone will benefit. That works itself out, at the end. But, I really enjoyed this work on shopper purchase rate because, that gives Colin a reason to talk to me.
Love it. Well, yeah, let's dive in though, and now and talk about let's talk a little bit about the research here as we start from the what I call the strategic disconnect here. So the research uncovered that the primary barrier to scaling in-store media investment isn't a lack of measurement technology, but more a lack of alignment. Can you expand on this? What does this mean exactly? What is this lack of alignment, and why is it so pervasive across brands, retailers, and agencies?
Yeah, it's interesting because, I'm about 8 years into this and watching the commerce side of retail media explode based on digital websites, offsite, all those kind of things. There was always this known factor that business will grow to a place that is, a certain level of achievement when the shopper volume and the revenue of the retailer is still in the store, right? That's always kind of been the path that's been followed. But when you look back, the scorecards that plan investments, execute investments, show the results and the KPIs of investments have remained mostly independent, right? Merchandising, RMN, MMM. And that just was never addressed. It was always just digital side will continue to grow, and at some point in the future we'll address in store. And so what we found in this research is that the brands don't think of them differently. It just gets executed differently.
Mm.
And so what they really want is a common language that shows when a certain amount of money goes into this retailer, regardless of what scorecard or regardless of what path in the door, that the amount of investment shows the amount of units moved. And so that's what shopper purchase rate really is to not say a tech solution is the answer, but organizationally you have to address that the money is all inclusive and the units moved are all inclusive. That's the feedback we got from the brands by doing this research.
And I think it goes to the organizational operational challenge that we're facing in the industry today is that different stakeholders, as Paul just alluded to, are evaluating the same campaign or the same media through a different definition of success. Because you have media teams that are looking at efficiency or being able to drive awareness. You have merchants that care obviously about product movement. You have the retail media network that obviously cares about investment and growing revenue and profit. And one of the important things is that we're not saying that I think that any of this is wrong. It's just that it's a feature that we have not really accounted for in the way that we evaluate success of a campaign and the way in which we think about how we should be communicating across these different stakeholders. Because it's almost like, the louder you scream isn't going to get people to pay attention to what you're saying anymore. It's just going to get them more annoyed at you. It's about figuring out, how do I take what I'm trying to say and say it in a way that's going to make sense to the person that I'm talking to. And I think that's a really big unlock, I think, with a lot of the research that Paul and the ISM and Catalyst teams really uncovered here.
Yeah. And so, some of this points to the assumption that in-store media should be held to the same standards as digital as a source of the problem. What's wrong with this premise? And what are the specific consequences of applying digital native metrics like ROAS to a physical environment?
I'll start there because I'm pretty passionate about this one in the sense of like,
Yes.
I don't, speaking on behalf of myself and the IAB, like we are not anti-digital, obviously.
Right.
Digital obviously has been incredibly valuable for the advertising and media industry. The problem is that digital marketing and digital advertising has conditioned all of us to expect a level of precision that cannot be. It's precision and also like too much simplification in a way where the physical store environment is incredibly messy and it's not one that is perfectly replicable, if that's a word, to the way in which digital operates. Now, the other thing that I like to point out is that digital itself is also not completely, our false sense of precision also goes towards digital too. Like it's almost like because we can track everything down to a click, we believe that everything upstream can also be directly attributable to a next step or a next click or a next decision in the customer journey. And if there's anything that I've taken away from being in the marketing industry for 15 years is that there's a reason that human psychology and people that really are expert in that play so well in the marketing industry, and it's because it's a very messy, imperfect world. And I think what we're shining a light here on is that like the physical retail environment just is emblematic of that messiness.
Yeah. I think some of the real world implications are that if you take a digital one-to-one attribution approach, a ROAS approach, what you end up doing is correlation to a tactic, right?
Mhm.
So, and that's what we kind of been stuck into as a silo, as this audio ad or this screen ad. We're doing the most we can to show that when this ad played, this lift happened, right? When in reality, in the store, to Colin's point, is I'll steal kind of uh, um, Todd Hessenfeld's worlds, is, there's so many different aspects that a brand is investing in store: price, placement, promotion, so many things that are happening around that that could also be contributing to that, to the outcomes of that. But what you really want to know as a brand is you made a total investment with this retailer, this merchant, this merchandiser, and units sold at this level. Do you really need to know which specific tactic thing that attribute to technology? Yeah, maybe for efficiency's sake, to Colin's point. But you're really looking at a pretty messy environment with a lot of legacy linear signage, printed signage that's not going away. And like, how can you really say that this one tech thing was the cause of your ROAS and your outcome? I think that's the kind of wedge you get stuck into, because the retail media people are used to that. That's just the way they see it, as an option of, one of 12 things on a wheel, and they have to perform to earn budget and to earn growth. It doesn't apply that way to in-store. And I think that's really what we're trying to make sure, is that regardless of what tech you chose for the store, the metrics exist today through those scorecards to just remodel the way that those things align and tell a consistent story from brand to brand, from retailer to retailer, which RMNs probably don't love, and indices, if you will. But that's really what we're trying to accomplish here, is to just make it more universal across all the different verticals and different retails.
Yeah, and I mean, to both of your points, it's definitely, there's a lot of things tangled in there. I mean, each vendor has incentive to try to get credit for the win, so to speak. Each internal team at an organization is likely incentivized to, want to get their win as well. And then just, to your other point, clicks are really easy to measure versus other things in the physical world that are quite, so in other words, you've as you both already highlighted, there's a lot of things to untangle there. You briefly mentioned shopper purchase rate. Let's talk a little bit more about this, and as a potential framework to help people wrap their heads around this at a high level. How do you describe shopper purchase rate, and how does this help to redefine success?
I'm happy to start because, from my lens, the thing that I always, whenever members like Paul and others come to us with new research, one of the things I always like to look at is like, are we introducing new things, and are they new metrics or are they new frameworks? Because I think the last thing we need is a new like KPI, and that's exactly what this does not do. At least the way that I've read through it and understood it and worked, in the conversations I've had with Paul and others, it's introducing the conversation starter for the industry to start thinking about multiple metrics together. Um, like when we look at the store, I think that you can piece together that answer for a more precise understanding of how did media in the store result in shopper consideration, shopper purchase. We just have to bring all those metrics together. And that's what this is doing. It's looking at dollars, it's looking at units moved, it's looking at shopper behavior, all those things and more, because it's really taking those scorecards from those different stakeholders and providing a framework to actually have that conversation in a productive way across the different organizations that are involved.
Yeah, we use the word through line a lot, Greg, in our internal conversations. Essentially, what we do and we're in validation phase with a bunch of brands right now, is to just stand those various scorecards up alongside of each other. Look at the metrics that relate to in-store against this through line of units moved, pull those out into one comprehensive story. So we're not reinventing anything. We're not, and to Colin's point, we're not bringing a new KPI. We're essentially saying these things go together when they really haven't been put next to each other,
Yeah.
right? In history. And I can give you examples. I mean, I initiated this research because more than a year ago, I started working with a large RMN that the leader came from a merchant organization. And he initiated a lot of what we're talking about on his own, where there was no new tech rolled out. There was no, new advanced development, new KPIs. It was essentially the RMN had an allocation of investment made available to the merchandising team, to the merchant team, to which they can spend money against. And through that, it was added to the omnichannel view of total units moved, right? So you
Yeah.
could see side by side which of these specific areas of the business drove the most units moved for you. So we're seeing this in practice. It's just kind of piecemeal together across different RMNs in different ways. But again, I think all we did was introduce the framework. The interpretation of how to execute that organizationally was brought to life by the RMN and the merchant side of the organization. And we've seen literally an order of magnitude in growth of investment toward digital in store. So it can be effective without having to roll out a bunch of new tech to answer the questions.
It's
Yeah.
also
Yeah.
like
Well,
it's really good timing too, because where we are in the industry is we've hit that point of growth. We've hit that point of everyone is there are more retail media networks coming or commerce media networks coming online. Like we're starting to see that lessen naturally. And the conversation I think has moved from sort of that exuberant growth phase to more of an operational and execution focused phase, where it's going to require tighter integration between these teams. It's going to require that retail media is more aligned rather than sort of adjacent from the core business. So this framework just happens to be at a good time, I think, in the industry's evolution to be a stepping stone towards that greater alignment.
yeah. I mean, it sounds like that. Yeah. The maturity of the of retail media has reached that point where a common language like SPR, for instance, would be beneficial. And I think the other thing, I know we touched on some of the internal reasons why this is important. I think the obvious thing that I know, everybody knows this intellectually, but customers are not thinking about which thing they clicked on or where they looked or whatever. They're buying the product or not, right? And so I think anything that helps us kind of get back to this, like customers don't just interact on a single channel or think in a single way. Anything that can remind us all of that is going to be helpful in measuring effectiveness, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's really about like this next phase when it comes to measurement of commerce media. It's about more fit for purpose measurement.
Yeah.
I did about 20 RFPs in Q4 of last year, and then I do about 2 a week right now for new business. And at the end of last year, most of the models that were presented as, "Hey, fill this in for us," had an ROI based on an RMN investing in a screen or a technology and expecting their own growth to be the payback. And that just is very difficult. It's very, very difficult. It's a thin margin, right? But
Yeah.
if you can show how you get credit for the business of driving units sold within the store, the ROI jumps just amazing levels, right?
Yeah.
And so that's actually become more common for me to be asked about since we've been pushing this SPR is how do I give credit to the other things, and I can include that into my ROI model. That's just kind of happening naturally. And I think the other conversation I get a lot is when you look at the allocation of retail media and Amazon still being a very large percentage of that revenue, that's because the retail media networks aren't really introducing what the physical store contributes to
Mm.
their RMN, right?
Yeah.
There's that advantage over Amazon and nobody's really talking about. And if you can solve for this problem of giving credit towards the right things, I think you'll see a very different pie chart. for the sake of RMN. And I'm trying to support Colin's point on what's the next level of growth here. And it's really about capturing what the physical store truly attributes to that investment, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then maybe to make that even more practical, maybe if you could walk us through a hypothetical example, what is a CPG brand runs an in-store campaign. What does the conversation look like in the, I'm sure many are familiar with what it might look like using a traditional ROAS model, but how does a traditional ROAS model compare with this shopper purchase rate framework
Yeah,
conversation?
we're not trying to replace ROAS either. I mean, I think
Yeah.
you're never going to convince anybody. I mean, I've sat in panels in front of Colin where he'll pose the loaded question and wait for the fist to start flying on, how important it is to always have that general ROAS
Sure.
conversation, iROAS conversation. Those will still exist. What we've seen in practice is that if you take the key points in the scorecard that all reflect money goes in, right, to an RMN and or a merchant. Here's my total investment as a brand in this campaign, right, or against this product. Um, that money goes in. Look at all the various KPIs that are existing in those scorecards, aggregate them into one view,
Mm.
right? And show this total investment got this many units sold. It might be units sold off just the website, off the stores, off the different ways and programs that are being made available, and then show the brand what their total return on that investment was. So I'll go back to the example I used with our one of the RMNs is when you look at it as a total investment and total units moved, what you'll often find is that the in-store digital screen or audio outperforms the digital world, not because of any factor that it's not as, impactful. It's just that the majority of the revenue occurs within the store.
Mm.
So by
Yeah.
ratio, it naturally shows a better performance on the dollar invested in that media type. So that's really the effect of it, right? Is you'll see a dollar into digital and a dollar into a in-store. When you factor in units moved in store, the dollar in store actually lifts the entire program to a much higher level of performance, right? Because you're giving credit to everything that was applied. So that's really the practical effect of it. Um, I don't know what that does long term to the way money flows in, one of the different doors into the retail and retail media network. That's probably the next phase here, right? Is the linear curve dropping, the digital curve rising. Where's that intersect point? Um,
Yeah.
that's all yet to come. But in practice, that's what we're seeing in this shopper purchase rate.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it. Love it. Well, thanks both for joining today. Got a couple last questions as we wrap up here. And first one is, if we were having this interview 1 year from today, what is one thing that we would definitely be talking about?
I think where we're at today is very much like not necessarily like whether in-store works or not. I think everyone has this gut fundamental belief that yes, obviously in-store is a impactful place to be able to
Yeah.
um, lure or change shoppers' decisions. I think what we're debating is like, is it worth it, sort of thing. Like,
Yeah.
is it gonna be worth the investment? Whether you're a retailer that's looking to potentially stand up media in the store and have it as a core offering, or as a brand who's looking to invest in those offerings. And I think what we'll move to in a year is more of a discussion around how in-store fits into a more integrated omni-channel retail experience. So really shifting from like this like channel orientation that it's in right now, like the channel of in-store, and more about how we optimize in-store within
Mm.
a broader strategy.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, right now we're in validation phase. We had to turn away brands. We had so many that wanted to participate in it. We just were overwhelmed by the number of people that wanted to be in it. So I think a year from now, I think you'll hear a louder voice from the brands. I think what you'll hear is the brands saying, this makes a lot of sense to us, Mr. RMN, Mrs. RMN. How can we do this more? I just based on the responses I've had and the way people have said, okay, so I don't have to learn another tech. I don't have to learn the way one retail media network's doing in-store versus another. This could be a universal framework. I like that. I don't have to learn anything new. I just have to be presented the information in a different way. So I feel like a year from now, you'll hear a louder voice from the brands about this.
Yeah, sounds great. And last question for each of you. What do you do to stay agile in your role, and how do you find a way to do it consistently?
It's the hardest part, I feel like, of my job is trying to stay on top of everything that's going on in our industry, and just making sure that I'm spending a lot of time listening, not only like to things like podcasts, but also, just what's going on generally within the business world and how that affects our industry. I'm very lucky in the sense that the IAB really is like the industry convener, so I get to talk to all aspects, all corners, if you will, of this industry in terms of retailers, brands, agencies, the tech providers, and everyone comes with how they see the ecosystem evolving, and that really helps me stay on top of what's going on. So in some ways I'm lucky, and then other ways it's incredibly challenging because people also expect us to know everything that's going on, and it's very difficult. I basically give myself grace, and I'm like, I can't be omnipotent.
That's a hard job.
Well,
I like to talk to people. I do read media, of course, like everybody else, but it's so hard to really know what you're reading about and what's been written for marketing purposes or has some opinion to it. I try to talk to people as much as I can and just get their real perspective and read their body language. And, that to me is more valuable. And plus people are really willing to say more when you're connected with them, right? And you're in a conversation. That's my strategy, is really get as much face time with people that I think are influential as I possibly can.
yeah, love it. Well, again, I'd like to thank Paul Brenner, SVP Global Retail Media and Partnerships at In-Store Marketplace, and Collin Colburn, Vice President Commerce and Retail Media at IAB, for joining the show. You can learn more about Paul, Collin, In-Store Marketplace, and IAB by following the links in the show notes. This episode is brought to you by Tech Systems. They're leaders in full-stack tech services, talent solutions, and helping companies put it all in action. You can learn more at techsystems.com. That's teksystems.com. And thanks again for listening to the Agile Brand Podcast. If you liked the episode, hit subscribe and drop a rating so others can find the show too. And if you're interested in consulting, advisory work, or if you need a speaker for your next event, feel free to reach out. Just visit gregkihlstrom.com. That's GregKihlstrom.com. The Agile Brand is produced by Missing Link, a Latina-owned, strategy-driven, creatively fueled production co-op. From ideation to creation, they craft human connections through intelligent, engaging, and informative content. Until next time, stay curious and stay agile.
The Agile Brand.